The Palapa Oath of Gajah Mada, the mad ambition that almost came true. He stood before the king and the entire elite of Majapahit, his throat parched by the dust of ambition, his mouth ready to utter a promise that would shake the very foundations of the heavens. It was not an oath, it was a curse that would burn through his life, sacrifice everything he loved, and haunt his every breath until his dying day. And at the pinnacle of his victory, the most subtle betrayal, one that festered within the palace. Walls would tear it all to pieces. Imagine the scene. The year was 1258 Saka, or 1336 AD. Majapahit was at its zenith, yet it was like a tiger surrounded by wolves. Gajah Mada, the Grand Vizier, Mahapati, had just crushed the Rakudi rebellion and saved the throne. As a reward, Queen Tribhuwana Wijaya Tunggadewi offered him anything. Wealth, a throne, women? He refused it all. Instead, before a court of nobles who smirked with cynicism, he raised his hand and uttered the oath that would be eternally etched into our collective memory. Sira Gajah Mada Patiham Kubhumi. Tanayo namokti palapa, Sira Gajah Mada. Lamun huwos kalah Nusantara ingsun amukti palapa. Lamun kalah ring gurun, ring seram, Tanjung Pura, ring Haru, ring Pahang, Dompo, ring Bali, Sunda, Palembang, Tumasik, sama na ingsun amukti palapa. As long as I have not conquered the archipelago, I will never taste palapa, all worldly pleasures. The world held its breath. Palapa was not just spice. It was a metaphor for every pleasure, women, wealth, security. He had condemned himself to the ascetic life of a soldier until his ambition was fulfilled. Sneers and whispers echoed, "Madman! Arrogant, impossible!" But Gajah Mada was no fool. Behind his fiery oath lay a brilliant, coldly calculated war machine. He did not rely on military might alone. This was a geopolitical chess game played at a godlike level. First, diplomacy. He sent undagi, experts in technology and architecture, to various kingdoms. He helped them build, improve irrigation, and brought prosperity. Who would fight someone who brought wealth? Second, psychology. His fleet of massive ships called jongs were not just troop carriers. They were symbols of power that loomed over every shore, making every king's heart pound with fear long before any battle began. Third, military. His Bhayankara Corps was the first special forces, unit in the archipelago, elite, highly trained and fanatical. They were the spearhead that ensured every campaign was executed with deadly precision. One by one, his oath was fulfilled. Bali fell, Lombok, Kalimantan, Sumatra, almost the entire archipelago bowed to the banners of Majapahit. The oceans became silk roads connecting the islands. Under one incredibly complex administration, Majapahit was no longer a kingdom. It was an empire, and Gajah Mada was its brain, its architect, its demon. Yet one item on his oath remained, the most dangerous one, the one that would become his stumbling block, the kingdom of Sunda. Here the tension reached its peak. Gajah Mada saw Sunda not as an ally, but as the final nail to be hammered into the coffin of his ambition. He demanded total surrender. However, King Linggabuana of Sunda had pride as high as the sky. He came to Majapahit with thousands of escorts, not to surrender but to marry his daughter, Dyah Pitaloka, to King Hayam Wuruk. This was a critical moment. Diplomacy versus ambition. Gajah Mada saw it as an opportunity. He persuaded the young Hayam Wuruk that this marriage was a form of conquest. Sunda must surrender its sovereignty as Yawadana, a dowry. To the Sundanese, this was the highest insult. A battle was inevitable. At the field of Bubat, a place that should have been a wedding venue, turned into a killing field. The outnumbered Sundanese escort was surrounded and annihilated by the Majapahit Legion. King Linggabuana was killed. Princess Dyah Pitaloka, in profound grief and shame, chose Belapati, ritual suicide, plunging a Caries into her own heart. Blood soaked the earth of Bubat. Gajah Mada's ambition had finally reached its end. The archipelago was practically united. The Palapa Oath was almost fulfilled. The victory at Bubat became Gajah Mada's tombstone. He expected praise. What he got was a curse far more deadly than an enemy's sword. Queen Tribhuwana, Hayam Wuruk's mother, was a master politician. From the start, she had supported Gajah Mada's ambition because it benefited Majapahit. But she also saw how the Mahapati had become too powerful, too revered, almost rivaling the king. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, and Gajah Mada had become too absolute. The massacre at Bubat was the perfect excuse to bring him down. Behind the palace curtains, Queen Tribhuwana whispered to her son, Hayam Wuruk, who was consumed by grief over the death of Dyah Pitaloka, whom he had secretly loved. "See, my son," she whispered. "He has made you an executioner. He has stained your hands with the blood of your would-be bride. He has made Majapahit a cruel empire in the eyes of the world. He is no longer controllable. His ambition has overruled his loyalty." Hayam Wuruk, filled with anger and disappointment, finally saw the Mahapati not as a hero but as a threat. This was the most subtle betrayal. Not with poison or a dagger, but with politics. Gajah Mada was not executed. That would cause an uprising. He was honorably discharged. His power was stripped away slowly. He was exiled to the luxury of a villa, kept far from the center of power, a prisoner in his own home, a captive of his own ambition. The architect of Nusantara spent his days watching his near-perfect dream crack. Without his iron leadership, the conquered regions began to break away one by one. His empire crumbled slowly, like sand held too tightly in his hands. He failed, not because he lost a war, not because his oath was too ambitious, but because of one thing he never considered. The greatest danger does not come from an enemy on the battlefield, but from the sweet smiles surrounding the throne. The Palapa Oath was finally broken. Gajah Mada never did taste palapa, worldly pleasures. His greatest pleasure, power, had been stolen by the very people he served. His mad ambition almost came true, only to be destroyed by an ambition, more subtle and more cruel, the ambition to retain power.